Good evening. In the last 72 hours, Pakistan has subjected some of our forces to a lot of barbaric behavior. First, it was BSF head constable Narendra Kumar Singh. He was not just killed by the Pakistani troops, his body was mutilated, his throat was slit, his eyes were gouged out. This morning, terrorists barged into the homes of 3 policemen in Shopian. They abducted them, they shot them dead. Today, the government of India, less than 24 hours after saying yes, there will be an informal, unstructured meeting between the Indian and Pakistani foreign ministers in New York next week at the sidelines of the UNGA. Exactly 24 hours after that confirmation, today the government of India decided otherwise. It decided that enough is enough. Today at 4:22 p.m., CNN News 18 was the first channel to break this news that there will be no talks between India and Pakistan on the sidelines of the UNGA. Exactly an hour later, the Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Ravish Kumar confirmed that Sushma Swaraj, the External Affairs Minister, and her Pakistani counterpart Shah Mahmood Qureshi will not be meeting in New York next week. India is rejecting Pakistan's offer of talks, and it is making it clear, in fact going back to its stated position, which is that talks and terror cannot go together. So tonight on Face Off, we're asking what brought about this change of heart, rather quickly I must add, within 24 hours, and what may be a more solid medium to long-term policy when it comes to dealing with Pakistan. But first, what made India pull the plug on these talks? The official reasons, there were 3 reasons given by the MEA spokesperson when he put out that short video statement on why India decided otherwise in the span of 24 hours. Sticking point number 1, the beheading, the butchering of the BSF head constable Narendra Kumar Singh. Like I said, it's not just the killing per se, but the manner in which he was killed, the manner in which his body was mutilated, that was sticking point number 1. Sticking point number 2, terrorists abducting and killing 3 Jammu and Kashmir cops today in Shopian. That was the second reason that was cited by the MEA spokesperson. And sticking point number 3, Pakistan releasing Burhan Wani stamps, although the release of those stamps happened sometime in July. I'm given to understand sometime during the election campaign in Pakistan. Listen to what the MEA spokesperson Ravish Kumar said while he revealed to the world a story which CNN News 18 had broken an hour before that finally the decision has been made that India and Pakistan and their respective foreign ministers will not meet at the UNGA next week.
Since yesterday's announcement of a meeting between the foreign ministers of India and Pakistan in New York later this month, 2 deeply disturbing developments have taken place. The latest brutal killings of our security personnel by Pakistan-based entities and the recent release of a series of 20 postage stamps by Pakistan glorifying a terrorist and terrorism confirm that Pakistan will not mend its ways. Now, it is obvious that behind Pakistan's proposal for talks to make a fresh beginning, the evil agenda of Pakistan stands exposed, and the true face of the new Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, has been revealed to the world in his first few months in office. Any conversation with Pakistan in such an environment would be meaningless. In view of the changed situation, there will be no meeting between the foreign ministers of India and Pakistan in New York.
All right, so that was the first reaction from the government of India, the MEA spokesperson, citing why within 24 hours, 2 polar opposite decisions were made. First, confirmation that the meeting will happen, and then 24 hours after that, the cancellation of that meeting. I want to first go across to our big newsmaker on Face Off tonight, and this is the first official reaction from the Pakistani side. Shah Mahmood Qureshi is the Foreign Minister of Pakistan. He's now joining us on the phone line. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. Your first reaction to India now turning down the offer of a meeting between you and your Indian counterpart in New York next week. I'm sure you would have got this message through official channels as well now.
Well, I'm disappointed. I would say I'm disappointed because I thought this was a good opportunity to re-engage and discuss outstanding issues and discuss a way forward. It could be the beginning of, a new relationship. Look at the sequence. The Indian Prime Minister writes to the newly elected Prime Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Imran Khan.
Yes.
And in his letter, he says constructive. He mentions constructive engagement.
Yeah.
What would you deduce from constructive engagement? What I would deduce is sitting together and charting a way forward. Pakistan responded positively, and he said, fine, we are willing to engage, we are willing to sit and discuss, the way forward.
Mm-hmm.
And then India recognizes that and responds and gives a date for the 27th. But it seems that internal divisions or political pressure has taken the best of them, and they've succumbed to political pressure, which is unfortunate.
Internal divisions or political pressure, you say. The official reasons, though, cited by the Foreign Ministry spokesperson here in India are two. One, the mutilation of one of our soldiers of the BSF, and two, the release of certain stamps glorifying certain terrorists that was done in your country. How would you respond to those two reasons?
Unfortunately, let me tell you, this is a lame excuse. This is a lame excuse. This situation was not, it is just propped up. It's an afterthought, in my view. For example, they've also mentioned, some stamps that have come out.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, those stamps had come out in July, and now we are in September, and you had agreed to engage with Pakistan. You see, if you want to run away, then there are 21 different reasons to turn away. But it is sad. This government wanted to engage positively. We want peace and stability in the region. We feel the entire region is suffering. For example, we talk of regional connectivity, we talk of regional trade. How can you have regional connectivity? How can you have regional trade if you don't even allow the SAARC summit to take place?
Okay. Well, although we have no confirmation of whether the foreign ministers meeting on the sidelines of the UNGA, India will not take part, or whether it will not happen at all. There's no clarity on that. But final word, are you still hopeful that, if not at the UNGA, sometime in the foreseeable future, you might get a meeting with your Indian counterpart?
I am absolutely convinced. See, the challenges that they are pointing out, how do you deal with them? You sit and talk about them. You find a way out. By not engaging, you think these issues will disappear? Will go away? Come on. Be realistic.
Okay. All right. I appreciate you joining us. That was Shah Mahmood Qureshi. First reaction from the Pakistan government, the Foreign Minister of Pakistan there. He's calling it a cop-out. He's saying that this has been done because of internal domestic compulsions, and that going forward, engagement and dialogue is the only way forward between the Indian and Pakistan governments. Let me bring in our guests. Here in our studios, G Parthasarthy is former High Commissioner to Pakistan, somebody who knows Mr. Qureshi reasonably well, I'm sure. Praveen Swami is our Group Consulting Editor with First Post, our sister concern. We're joined by General Retired B.P. Malik, former Chief of Army Staff. Sanjay Jha, spokesperson of the Congress. We're hoping to be joined by Aman Sinha, spokesperson of the BJP. We'll also be joined by Mona Alam from Pakistan, senior Pakistani journalist. Let me start with you. What Qureshi said, that this is a cop-out and India is doing this because of internal pressures and it has nothing to do with Pakistan. Does that add up? I mean...
Look, I'm a firm believer that with a neighboring country or with any other country, however bad your relations, you should have a continuing process of engagement. Not necessarily at the foreign minister's level,
sure,
or at the NSA's level. I'm particularly against it at the NSA level because it's asymmetrical. The Pakistan NSA is a dummy. Durrani was sacked and this guy has disappeared to history. So, but some engagement should be continued, but should continuously be there. But that has to be appropriately determined, not necessarily at the foreign minister's level. That's been our experience, which has succeeded in the past with Rajesh Mishra and Satinder Lamba as
so why did we then decide yesterday to have the talks?
Frankly, I found that I found it rather surprising because it was precisely one day after an Indian soldier had been beheaded.
Yeah.
And the embers of his cremation had not yet even sort of, come to peace. But we did it, fair enough. And I think what has happened is perhaps they realized that was a miscalculation. Because that beheading was followed by the killing of 3 cops in Srinagar, which is for a first time. So if after we announce a dialogue, this is what the Pakistanis do, and have no doubts it's the Hizbul Mujahideen, it has been reconsidered. I personally, as I said, I would have waited before yesterday's announcement. Okay. But I favor this. And the last thing about Shah Mahmood Qureshi, he's the worst interlocutor to have. Highly abrasive. And Mr. S.M. Krishna learned that to his cost when he visited Islamabad. And more important, viciously anti-Indian.
Okay. Praveen, the point is this. I mean, whatever the reasons are, and Ambassador Parthasarthy laid it out, and now post facto you can turn back and say, we should have been better prepared, at least public interaction should have been better managed. The fact is, on the face of it, and Qureshi is right when he turns around and says 24 hours ago, you said yes. 24 hours after that, you're saying no. At the very least, it looks, this is a flip-flop, if not amateurish.
It certainly hasn't been handled with any great sort of finesse or thinking through. And I think one of the questions here, which is key, is the one you asked. Why did Delhi decide to talk in the first place? Yeah. And it's quite clear, I think, what the pressures on Delhi are. There's local body elections coming up in Kashmir. Things are an utter mess because of violence. Candidates aren't willing to stand. Attacks on police people, their families have stepped up to very ugly levels. Yeah. And it may well have been felt that, look, opening up some kind of conversation here will help keep a lid on things, at least to open up some possibilities. And those 3 killings would probably have changed minds very quickly. Having said that, when you decide to talk, you don't do it because you think everything is going to be hunky-dory the next day. You do it because you think the other party is ready and willing to deliver at least some of what you seek. And it is unclear to me on what basis that appraisal was made.
Don't you factor in some of this, that when such an announcement is made, and we haven't, at the foreign minister's level, the last time they talked was in December 2015, so for almost 3 years now, you haven't had engagement at that level. When you make such an announcement, don't you factor in that there are forces at play which would try to derail it, there are forces at play which would make you, turn back? I mean, within 24 hours after announcement to now turn around and say, no, we're not doing it. I mean, look, how are the folks in the State Department going to look at this and say, what are they going to say? What are the people in the Foreign Ministry in Beijing going to look at this and say?
Quite honestly,
I mean, make up your mind.
I don't think anyone in the world will be surprised that yet another round of India-Pakistan rapprochement has ended badly. You can write the script for these things the minute they begin. Having said that, I would be very surprised if that announcement yesterday was made without at least some prior conversation diplomatically and at other levels. And I would be even more surprised if certain commitments were not sought and received in the course of that conversation. Now, not being privy to this, it's very hard to say. But, I suspect that this falls in a pattern of things where commitments are received, such as after Pathankot, and then not delivered on. But you're quite right. You would think that Delhi by now would know that this is part of the script and factor this into the...
General Malik, I mean, we talked about this in our program last night as well. We have a very familiar pattern, template, script with the Pakistanis. Whether it was 99, Lahore Bus Yatra, and then Kargil, whether it was 2008 where the 26/11 attacks happened, 2013, Lance Naik Hemraj and his beheading, and now 2018. Any kind of, incremental progress in the relationship, almost inevitably, you have a terror attack after that. That's almost like a working template now in this relationship. So when that announcement was made yesterday, you would have thought that, the folks at the MEA, the folks who, helped arrive at that decision, would have factored in some of these, negative factors, like certainly not the manner in which, but at least, attempts to try and derail that process. For you to announce at 4 o'clock yesterday, only to retract at 5 o'clock today, like I said, it's flip-flop on the face of it. It makes you look amateurish.
Zaka, my feeling is that the decision that was taken yesterday was more on the civil side, being correct in diplomacies, and this must have been taken, the decision must have been taken maybe 2 days earlier.
Sure.
And then the reaction to what has happened to the BSF Jawan, the mutilation of the body, and then what has happened today, the government would have gauged the reaction, which was very strong, and then they would have decided that, look, it's no point in going ahead. Personally, I feel that we cannot stop a meeting with them, but this meeting was, I don't think it was going to be a dialogue.
Yeah, sure.
The result of the meeting, we do not know. How it would have panned out, we do not know. But it was just a meeting which I feel was more on the civil side, on the diplomatic side, as I said earlier.
Yeah.
As far as this reaction is concerned, what Mr. Qureshi said, I think he went wrong, that the foreign policy has to take into account the domestic response from the people. You can't ignore the domestic response.
Okay.
And that is what probably has happened, that watching the way public has reacted to these 2-3 incidents that have taken place,
okay,
the government has changed its mind and it has called off the meeting.
All right, gentlemen, give me a moment. I'm also joined on the phone line by Amit Malviya, spokesperson of the BJP. I appreciate you joining us, Amit. And I fully understand you speak for the party, not for the government. But at least can you help our viewers understand, how was it that 24 hours ago, it was good enough for India and Pakistan to talk, for the foreign ministers to meet at the UNGA in New York, and then 24 hours later, we've decided to call off those talks? I mean, can you help us understand? Because on the face of it, and I'm sorry I'm sounding repetitive on the show, it looks like a flip-flop.
Well, Zaka, I'm not quite sure why would you call it a flip-flop, because as far as I know, and as far as I heard the Minister of External Affairs, Srimati Sushma Swaraj's briefing yesterday, she was very clear that there is no talk proposed on the table with Pakistan. She also went on to explain that India's position is unambiguous and that talks and terror cannot go on together. She also reiterated that there are talks that happen at various levels, like the BSF speaks to the Pakistani Rangers. Those deployed on the borders have these flag meetings where there is a certain dialogue that's happening. And she also said that the country has taken a conscious call to have a dialogue at the level of the NSA, because while we will not have a dialogue as long as terror is going on, but we must be talking about terror, and that's why NSA level conversations are happening. But nothing beyond that. And there has been absolutely no confusion on that. The flip-flop that you're referring to is the media narrative, which is not born in reality. You've got to listen to what the MEA has said. You've got to listen to what the foreign minister has said, and there has been no conversation, and there has been no offer of a talk on the table.
Amit, look, I mean, I don't think it's a media creation. The MEA spokesperson said what he said yesterday, and then he retracted what he said today. There may be changed circumstances in 24 hours, no doubt about that. What I'm trying to get at is simply this. We're a big country. We are the 6th largest economy in the world. Global capitals around the world take us seriously. Within 24 hours, if we have to go back on a decision, ostensibly for very good reasons, I'm not questioning the judgment or the reasons behind why this flip-flop, quote-unquote, has happened, What is it? What are folks sitting in the State Department thinking right now? What are people sitting in the Foreign Ministry in Beijing thinking right now? What are the big powers in the world thinking right now? Here's a country, here's a ministry, here's a government that can't seem to make up its mind. You want to talk to Pakistan or you don't want?
Well, Zaka, again, I repeat myself. There was no offer or even a proposal for a talk. And I take you back to the briefing that Mrs. Sushma Swaraj did on this issue. Now, there cannot be a final word beyond what she said, because the position was very, very clear, and she spoke to the media yesterday. So if you're referring to anyone else who's spoken, I'm not aware of that. I have seen Sushma Swaraj's briefing. It is there, on media channels and everyone, and that's what we should go by.
Can I also ask you one question? We had Shah Mahmood Qureshi, who's the Pakistan Foreign Minister, on the show just right at the top, and he said this was a cop-out by India. He said that India is doing this because of domestic pressure and internal political compulsions. This has nothing to do with Pakistan. Doesn't it seem like the message that's going out is Pakistan wants talks. Pakistan is being the large-hearted party here. India, on the other hand, just can't seem to make up its mind.
But Pakistan wants talk because they want to hunt with the hares and run with the hounds. But that's really not what India's position is. We are very clear that the Pakistani state of Pakistan has to stop promoting terror from across the border, and unless they do, there is no dialogue. We have been absolutely consistent. It doesn't matter what the Pakistani spokesperson is saying, because they will say what is convenient for them. But we as a country, we as a government are very clear.
Sure.
Unless the terror sponsored from across the border stops, there's going to be no conversation. And we have very successfully isolated Pakistan on the international stage. Today, the world knows that Pakistan is the Ivy League of terrorism. That's where all jihadi activities are originating from. And they must be isolated. That's the big diplomatic success that India has had over the last 4 years. And therefore, Zaka, in the interest of our country and in the interest of ensuring that there's a consistent message that goes out, and, sections of the media, the intelligence, are all responsible for building this, messaging. We should be all very clear that unless Pakistan stops terrorism, there's going to be no dialogue as Pakistan would want us to get into, because it suits their agenda and it doesn't suit us.
Absolutely. I've been saying this from day one. Don't talk. I mean, unless the condition of talks and terror don't go hand in hand is met, don't talk. Anyway, thank you. I appreciate you joining us, Amit, at this last minute. But let me now go across to Sanjay Jha. Sanjay, this whole thing about flip-flops or talks one day, terror the next, and then the dialogue is called off, is not something that is new. We've seen this in the UPA years, we've seen this in the Vajpayee years, and we're seeing it now in the Modi years. So really, nobody's cracked the code on how to deal with this country called Pakistan. Neither have you folks, nor has Amit Malviya's party.
Zaka, I don't think anybody is going to deny the reality that Pakistan is a complex, difficult neighbor, and we have no choice but to negotiate and find ways and means regularly, despite sporadic violence, terror attacks, and what have you. But one thing stands out, Zaka, which is that if you look at the foreign policy with reference to Pakistan since Narendra Modi became Prime Minister, to call it incoherent or to call it ambivalent is like paying it a compliment. I think it's been non-existent. I mean, look at the first part itself. There is this big bravado about inviting, all the neighbors for Narendra Modi swearing in. And then you have the entire U-turn on the Hurriyat issue, when the truth is that as a government, they had an agenda of alliance later on with the Jammu and Kashmir government with PDP on having conversations with the Hurriyat. You are aware of how we have invited the Pakistan investigators to come and look at the Pathankot terror attack. The meeting of the NSA is happening very surreptitiously in Bangkok. And, despite all these hackneyed repetition of talks and terror don't go together, the truth is the government has at no point, I think, had any what I call as a semblance of an attitude and an approach to a problem with an unpredictable, irrational labor. We are not taking that away. But, you know, there should have been some degree of what I call as political maturity. Now, I think all the panelists have hit the correct buttons in saying,
no, hang on,
if you look at yesterday's event, and
what would you have done? What would the UPA, if you were in power, you decided yesterday, okay, our foreign ministers are going to talk, and then these events have happened. There's the exact nature of the mutilation of Head Constable Narendra Kumar Singh's, you know, that story comes out, and then the 3 Jammu and Kashmir policemen come out. Obviously, the public mood in India is angry. How would you have done anything different?
Well, Zaka, let me try and answer it, and I'm answering this as, you know, as a student of politics, that what I think we would have done, and I think, you know, I looked at the Congress foreign policy in the past, you know, we would have probably waited, because, you know, the beheading of soldiers has happened not too long ago, even before what happened to the BSF soldier Narendra Kumar some time ago. The truth is, there has been a lot of violence at the cross-border level. I mean, civilians have died. I think over 256 civilians have died. You have had almost 400 plus security forces who have been killed. Now you have a new prime minister in Pakistan. And I think what India should have done, ideally speaking, is instead of jumping the gun and saying we'll have a meeting by the sidelines, you don't just have coffee, you also have conversations there. The truth is, you would have waited to see how does the army, which we all know has supported Imran Khan in becoming prime minister, what does it show in terms of terrorism? What does it show in terms of the other diplomatic niceties that Imran Khan utters? And what is ultimately going to be the role of the army and Imran Khan towards India?
Okay.
I think one would have waited a lot more patiently.
Okay, Aman Sinha of the BJP is also joining us, but I want to go across to Mona Alam, because Mona was on our show 24 hours ago. And we were all, you know, certainly Mona was a big advocate of welcoming the talks and so on and so forth. And here you are, 24 hours on, and there are no talks, Mona Alam. And may I add, not with a great degree of help from you folks there, because if the beheading of Narendra Kumar Singh had not happened, and if the 3 Jammu and Kashmir cops were not abducted and killed, perhaps those talks would have stood a chance. So that's exactly what I was referring to yesterday as well, that look, it's all great to talk, your intent to talk is great, but it has to be backed by action on the ground. And we're not seeing any change on that action on the ground.
Thank you, Zaka. See, it saddens me when I come across this news just 24 hours later, having been on your program on the same topic, and then again with the flip-flop on the same topic. But then again, whatever concerns that are being voiced out, I think it's a huge game plan in my perspective, because whatever government there is in India or in Pakistan, they're all in favor, they're all advocates of talks with the neighbor, with the hostile, historically hostile neighbor. But whenever the opposition has to have a play in there, they're the ones who are opposing the talks. We've seen that in your program as well last night. I'm sure there are a lot of clips that would second this statement of mine. But, you know, the opposition is always successful in imposing or in, you know, instilling this mindset in the government's mind. That is what I've come across.
There's
For
an
the
opposition
incident
in your
that
country
you've mentioned,
too.
your BSF Jawan.
There is an opposition in your country too.
For
there are
that's what they're doing as well.
There are
Would you recall?
that don't want talks, even in Pakistan, between India and Pakistan.
Yes, yes, that's right. Unfortunately, that is why I've made that statement for both sides of the border, yours and mine. And when you must recall that when the PTI was in opposition and PMLN under Nawaz Sharif wanted to pursue talks with India, they were the ones who used to say, "Jo Modi ka yaar hai, wo gaddar hai." That was the slogan, right? So whenever now they're in power, they're trying to advocate the same feelings. They're trying to advocate the same friendship between the two.
Mona Alam is saying pretty much what Shah Mahmood Qureshi, the foreign minister, also said earlier on in this program, that this decision has been made because of domestic and internal political compulsions. Did you not foresee, or did the events get ahead of you that you know, in 24 hours you've said yes to talks and now you're saying no to talks? It doesn't look like the decision of a well thought out strategy.
It doesn't look very mature.
Yeah, it doesn't look very mature.
Yes, Zaka, thank you very much. Foremost, our tributes to the supreme sacrifice of our brave Jawans and police officers. And let me assure you that their supreme sacrifice will not go in vain, and their, the barbaric, inhuman manner in which they were tortured to death, their death will be avenged by the forces. Now, let me say, as far as talks is concerned, there was not a structured statement from the MEA that there are going to be any talks. There was a proposal for certain meeting on the sidelines of UNGA, but considering the situation which evolved, and considering what actions that Pakistan and its so-called, whether they are state forces or they are non-state actors, they took. Obviously, it was a result of that the talks had to be cancelled. It's a long-held stand of Government of India that terror and talks cannot go together. Obviously, we would like to have talks, but the situation in which Pakistan puts us and the kind of inhuman, barbaric act that Pakistan indulges in, obviously there cannot be any scope for talks at this point in time.
I mean, that's what I was trying to get
as I mentioned to you, Zaka,
with Ahmed Malviya as well as our panelists here. Couldn't you have waited? What was the pressing need to announce it yesterday and then retract it today?
Yes,
I mean, the meeting was a week away. I think 27th was the scheduled date. You could have announced it a day before that, or a couple of days before that, once the ministers reached New York. And perhaps by then, the anger and the justifiable anger on Narendra Singh's, his killing and his mutilation would have probably subsided a bit.
No, Zaka, I gather your question, but there was no statement of MEA that there is going to be a structured dialogue or any talks. It was only the statement was only restricted to the fact that there is going to be some meetings on the sidelines of UNGA. And after what emerged, we saw, brutal killings of 3 police officers. Obviously, the Government of India will never proceed when Pakistan tries to pressurize and act in this barbaric, inhuman manner. They are going to be given a befitting response by our forces.
Let me get Ambassador Parthasarthy. You've been a spokesperson for the ministry. You've been a High Commissioner. Was there any pressing need to make this announcement yesterday and then retract it today? I mean, like I said, the meeting was a week away. You can even announce it. You can announce it a day before.
Look, you have to, in this situation, watch the flows of terrorism. There has been an escalation down which resulted in the beheading of one of our people, which is barbarous. It happened in Kargil, and we really told off Sartaj Aziz for that. And thereafter, that ministerial level thing didn't continue. So I think yesterday's statement, I think I have to disagree with the timing of it, but I still agree with the policy that we should continue a process of engagement at an appropriate level with appropriate people. Shah Mohammad Qureshi is not exactly God's gift to mankind. And Pakistan's NSAs, as I say, are powerless. We need to have the sort of dialogue which Mr. Vajpayee arranged, or later on after the Pakistan.
So in this instance, in the Imran cabinet or the Imran government, who is that person? Who is the?
These things are settled through intermediaries.
Of course.
And I'm not sure whether we've done it in this case. As I said, the NSA level talks are futile, given the status of the Pakistani NSA. But some form of keeping in contact. After all, Sartaj came during Kargil. There was a message that they were uncomfortable with what had happened. I don't think they were uncomfortable when they behead an Indian soldier. So the thing is, work it properly behind the scenes. You have to keep in touch. You cannot do it, but do it effectively, quietly.
I'm just going.
But this one thing, if I must say, the government must have felt that since it was a first message from Imran to our Prime Minister, it would be wrong to send the wide. So all I have a grouse is about the timing.
I'm just going back to the MEA statement, and Praveen, it says the evil agenda of Pakistan has been exposed, and the real face of the new Pakistan Prime Minister has come to light, even though he's been in office for only a few months. How do you? I mean, first of all, walk me through the wording. I mean, you've seen many an MEA statement. I don't think I've seen a statement like this in my years covering the MEA. How do you get off from this?
all I mean, that really sounds like it's been written by someone who's been spending too much time watching certain TV channels that shall remain unnamed. In general, it's good to use as few adjectives as possible. And it's not elegantly written, let's just put it that way. But to me also, I mean, the real problem here is not talks. It's not that India-Pakistan talks have failed because, someone didn't get this mechanism right or that bit of phrasing wasn't right. The real problem here is this. India wants something pretty simple from Pakistan. It wants it to lay off in Kashmir and get the jihadi groups operating there to cool down so this election process can happen with some semblance of normalcy. Now, if I was sitting in Pakistan, I'd be asking myself, should I do this? And if I do it, at what price am I going to do this? What am I going to get back in return for this? And I'm sure, someone in Delhi has been thinking about it. And I couldn't agree more with Partha where, this conversation needs to happen not, through meetings of the foreign ministers or whatever, but with the people who actually matter, who are the Pakistan army. And, maybe there is some channel there and maybe some assurances were held out which New Delhi feels bad about. I don't know.
But one of the problems has always been, and I'll ask General Malik this, we've had, DGMO level talks for a number of years now. We have a mill-to-mill engagement with the Pakistanis, but really do we have leverage with them? Do we really have influence with them to the extent that, like Praveen said, if our limited objective, let's say for the next month and a half, 2 months, is to get them to back off this election process in Kashmir, what's in it? If you are a member of the deep state in Pakistan, what's in it for you to lay off? I mean, your interest gets served if you actually vitiate that process and further alienate the Indian outreach in Kashmir, right?
Yeah, Zaka, one thing that comes out from the pattern that you had mentioned earlier, every time there is a talk or prospects of talk between the civilian prime ministers, and it is subverted or it is sabotaged quickly. So we know that who is controlling the terrorism in Pakistan. It is quite obvious that the civil government is not in a position to control terrorism in Pakistan, and that is why it is happening again and again. Now, therefore, I personally believe that it is futile talking to the civilian prime minister or the civilian government in Pakistan, even though it's a new government and people expected something out of that. But the fact is that it has been propped by the army and it is not going to change the policy of the army, Pakistan army. And we do not have much leverage. Let me also assure you that they know where do we stand. I'm talking of the Indian army. And we are not the rulers, but they are the rulers on the other side. So when they want to continue with their policy, which has been continuing for last 3 decades now, I don't think any dialogue at the DGMO level or at the post level, anywhere between the militaries, the two militaries, is going to get any results at all.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think you've hit the nail on the head, and that's been the conundrum. How does India get leverage with the Pakistani military establishment? Because I think it's clear as daylight over the last 20 years or so that it's the military establishment that's calling the shots. Surely, Mona Alam, I mean, I know, that there are elements in your establishment for whom it's in their interest not to have peace between India and Pakistan. But surely there must be somebody in the Pakistan military establishment who has enough leverage and influence to, rein it back in.
It's none other than the military establishment of Pakistan who had propped up and who had actually been advocating opening up the Kartarpur corridor. So I don't see any bifurcation.
Let's not go there.
Tell me another.
Let's not go there. Let's not go there. Please.
Because I know what's...
let's just leave that between Mr. Sidhu and General Bajwa. I don't think we should be going there.
Yeah, okay. That's exactly what I'm talking about. This conversation took place between Sidhu and General Bajwa was the one advocating for this.
No, we'll leave it to between those gentlemen. Address the question that I've asked you. I think it's a reasonable question to ask. Right? There is, and I'm not being bleary-eyed here. There is definitely a constituency which does not in your establishment. I think.
May I tell the young lady?
Okay.
And for you to put up that accusation?
She certainly, I regard, well-meaning. But I would suggest she read the American statement by the State Department on state-sponsored terrorism by Pakistan. They have said very, very clearly, this is the strongest statement that has come out, in which they have accused Pakistan, named the groups. They have named Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, and they have also named Dawood Company.
No, fair enough.
So,
for her
to say that the Pakistan Army are the sisters of charity is really...
No, all of this is known to us. What I'm trying to get at is, I think an extension of what General Malik said. We have known this. Yes. We have known this even when you were in service. What are we doing to change that? Is there anything in our powers that we can do to change that?
You want a frank answer?
Yeah.
Raise the costs for the Pakistan.
What is that? I keep hearing this again and again.
Listen,
what is this raise the cost?
Listen, the diplomatic costs are rising with the Americans and the West.
Sure.
And there are other costs we can inflict, which I do not want to go into.
Okay.
But let's make very clear, let's leave all the sentimentality out. That, Bajwa met Sidhu and said, come, I'll give you one more place for pilgrimage. It's all nonsensical.
What is raise the cost?
The standard argument on raising the costs has been make it more expensive for the Pakistan army to pursue these things, hit them harder through covert means, militarily, and change their behavior. The problem with this is defense spending is at a record low as a percentage of GDP. It hasn't been this small in years. And that reflects the Prime Minister's public statements in 2014, 2015 that the old age of conventional war fighting and threat making is over. It's entirely possible the Prime Minister believes that, look, this problem just isn't worth ratcheting up conflict for, and who knows where that may end. And it's better to have a small toothache than to end up with broken limbs on either side. The point is, you did try and raise the cost. You've had all this border shelling. You had this, so-called surgical strikes. It hasn't changed Pakistan's behavior.
No,
it hasn't stopped infiltration. The Americans have been going at this for years, saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, unless you stop this Taliban thing. It hasn't changed Pakistani behavior.
Yeah. Okay, I'll give the final word to the two political spokespersons. So Sanjay Jha and Aman Sinha, I'll start with Sanjay Jha. Very quickly, like I said, the UPA tried it, and Praveen is right, we've tried this with the border shelling. There was Operation Parakram, if you go back to 2001, 2002. You've had all kinds of, raising the cost, ratcheting up the escalation tactics tried with Pakistan. But the fundamental reality is the behavior of the deep state doesn't change. So I'm going to take closing comments from both of you. Is there anything that Government of India can do, the Indian state can do, to change the nature of behavior of certain elements in the Pakistani state?
The problem of Mr. Modi's government has been its complete obsession with what I call as the politics of perception. I agree that a lot of the dealings in our bilateral relationship with Pakistan are transactional. But, forget strategic or even medium term. But Mr. Modi's government is not even being very effective at that. And I think that statement is best reflected in what I think Mehbooba Mufti has said today, when she talks about the current kidnapping and the killing of the Jammu and Kashmir police personnel, and says Narendra Modi's muscular, macho policy in Kashmir has clearly boomeranged. And the truth, as I think somebody mentioned on your panel, we have become vulnerable, and Pakistan has actually, stoked trouble in Kashmir because we have mismanaged our own domestic, political challenges.
Aman, I'll give you the final word.
So I think the government has a lot to explain for, and we have made ourselves susceptible.
Ostensibly, your government is big on national security, and there are a lot of things that have gone right. All I want to know is, are we going to be stuck in this cycle of, Prime Minister reaches Lahore and a week later we have Pathankot. Yesterday we decide to resume the talks, and then the beheading news comes out, and then the abduction and killing of the cops comes out, and then we're again putting off those talks. Is it just going to be episodic?
Zaka, the Indian government has been successful in isolating Pakistan, and the entire global community today acknowledges that Pakistan is the epicenter of global terror. This is the government in whose tenure maximum number of terrorists have been neutralized. For the first time, surgical strikes took place in tenure of this government. And Army always had that capability and the capacity to inflict those surgical strikes, but the political will was missing, which is not the case anymore. Now that about Zaka, all which is there in our hands, we can do it. What Pakistan does, that is not in our hands. But let me assure you that if Pakistan does any kind of misadventure, it is going to be given a befitting response with twice the force.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up, and I'll thank all our guests. I think it's been a fascinating conversation, primarily because, I mean, you know, in diplomacy, such things don't happen. You don't have an announcement of talks, and then you have, you know, within 24 hours the talks being called off. We've had fiascos in the past. I mean, Agra Summit, and I can think of 100 other fiascos. But the problem is, I think there is an unpredictable nature of the Pakistani state. There is an unrepentant nature of the Pakistani state, and the reality is that, frankly, the Indian state needs to think seriously about the long-term implications and the capabilities of whether you can raise the cost against an enemy whose objective is very clear, and that is to bleed India by 1,000 cuts. The fact remains that there was really no need, no pressing need to make that announcement yesterday of a meeting between the foreign ministers at the UNGA. So here's my closing argument for tonight. In 24 hours, like I said, first India said yes, and then India is saying no to talks with Pakistan. It appears as if India jumped the gun when the announcement happened yesterday. There was no pressing need. The talks were a whole week away. You could have made that announcement just 24 hours before the actual meeting itself. You could have very well made that announcement in New York. There is no statute which requires the MEA spokesperson or the government of India to announce those talks 1 week prior to those talks. India needs to make its stand on Pakistan clear. It should not wait for an attack. This time it's Narendra Kumar Singh. God forbid it could be somebody else 6 months down the line. The response to a state which wants to bleed you by 1,000 cuts cannot be episodic. It has to be strategic, it has to be long-term, and we're still searching for that answer. I'm going to take a break. When we come back, thankfully, this man doesn't search for answers. It's fascinating always to listen to Rahul Dravid, The Wall. He speaks about India's recent disastrous tour to England, what's missing in Kohli's captaincy, and of course what can be now done to make Team India a better away test match team. A fascinating conversation with the man dubbed The Wall coming up next.